from a practical standpoint, dreaming runs on optimism, planning runs on realism. So that's where people get stuck sometimes. They have an amazing, like, I'm going to do this crazy thing, and it's a dream. But then when you get to planning, there needs to be some realism involved.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast. I'm Whitney, and I am so glad you're here today. Really, thank you for pressing play, for taking time out of your crazy, full life to get better as a leader. Here's what I know about you. You're listening because you already understand that leadership is influence. And the truth is, everyone has it. You might be leading in a corporate boardroom, a church office, a nonprofit, or around your own kitchen table. Wherever you lead, when you get better, everyone around you rises too. So on behalf of your team, your community, your family, thank you for investing in your leadership today. Today, we're listening in on a conversation between GLN President and CEO David Ashcraft and the always insightful and hilarious Jon Acuff. But before we dive in, can I ask a small favor? If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe. It's totally free, and it ensures you won't miss any of the incredible leadership conversations we bring your way. Our team works hard to deliver content that's not just inspiring, but extremely practical, something you can put into action right away. Thank you for doing that. All right, everyone, quick show of hands. Anyone else out there struggle with procrastination? Yes, my hand is up too. I don't necessarily struggle with procrastination in every aspect of my life. I'm pretty quick to tackle a work project. However, my disorganized garage would tell you that I can certainly put off home projects. So if you're someone who struggles to finish or maybe even to start, then this episode is for you. Because today's guest, Jon Acuff, gets it. And he's not just talking theory, he's lived it. Jon is a New York Times bestselling author of 10 books and was named by Inc. magazine as one of their top 100 leadership speakers. He's spoken all over the world to audiences at places like FedEx, Microsoft, Chick-fil-A, and even Comedy Central. In this conversation, GLN President and CEO David Ashcraft and Jon unpack why we struggle to accomplish our goals and sometimes why we don't even get around to setting them in the first place. It's a powerful, funny, and refreshingly honest conversation. You're going to laugh, you're going to relate, and you're going to walk away with real actionable steps to stop overthinking and start doing. So let's dive in. Here's David's conversation with Jon Acuff.
Hey, well, Jon, it's good to have you here on the GLN podcast today. You're doing well, and it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again too. It was I saw you fairly recently. It was fun to catch up in Chicago, and now to see you digitally is always a good time too.
Exactly. So appreciate you so much being a part of the Global Leadership Network and speaking at the summit. This was your second time at the summit this year. Is that correct?
It was my second time, and it was super, super fun. The audience is always amazing. The caliber of people you get to meet is super encouraging. So yeah, I had a blast, and I brought my whole team. So I had 6 or 7 team members with me, and a lot of them, it was their first time. So I had a lot of fun in a lot of different ways.
That's good. And, we always encourage people to bring your team because it just seems like you, as an organization, you go so much further faster if all of you experience that same thing. So hopefully it was a good thing for you guys that way.
Well, and the thing you just mentioned is really important because then you as a leader aren't trying to translate 2 days of fire hose. Yeah. I mean, the pressure of a leader is you can take as many notes as you want, but you try to capture what Nick Saban said in 3 minutes, exactly. Or try to capture what Christine Kane said. And so, yeah, I think it's really fun to take a full team because then you do get to process it. I always say there's 2 events that happen at events. There's the one on stage and there's the one in the halls or the one on the flight back or the drive back. And there's a lot of event that happens in those moments, especially if you have a team with you.
Well, what I found, Jon, when I would go to things like the summit or other places without a team, I'd come home and I'd come back to the office. I'd try to tell them what I experienced, and they're just they glass over and they're just waiting for it to wear off, and they figure we'll be back to normal soon here. So let's let them talk it out. So Exactly. It's good to have you get a mutual investment if there's a team there. Exactly. For those of you that don't know Jon well, actually one of the best speakers, and Jon, you have been one of the best received speakers that we've had on our stage in 31 years of Summit, so fun to know that. But also have been listed by Inc. as one of the top 100 leadership speakers. You've spoken to numerous organizations, whether it's FedEx, Nissan, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin. It's interesting, the variety, Chick-fil-A. Comedy Central, so kind of the spectrum as far as the kind of organizations that you speak to. How do you prepare for that variety of talk, or do you find that really it's the same content regardless of the organization? It applies to everybody.
Well, I think there's two things. One is every room is made a human. And so if you can remember that, you're already in a pretty good place. If you can remember that 1,000 engineers are human, and 500 dental hygienists are human, and 300 mom bloggers are human. And so I try to create content, whether that's from stage or in my books, that speaks to the real challenges real people are going through. And regardless of who you are, you can identify with them. That's the first thing. The second thing is I then work really hard to customize it to the people that are sitting there. Smart audiences can turn off the second they tell you have a stock photo talk, that whoever's sitting there is getting the same one. And so what I try to do is say, okay, what are the real issues they're having right now? So like one of the questions, I interview clients, I've interviewed you multiple times in preparation for a Global Leadership Summit, is I'll say, what's giving your people up in the morning? What's keeping them up at night? What are they excited about? What are they stressed about? Because one of my goals with a speech is I want them to hear something in that room that outside of that room wouldn't have made sense. Or I want them to hear a joke that killed in that room, but would have bombed in every other room. So for instance, I once was speaking to a group of 1,000 dentists, and I was flying from Nashville to Orlando for the event. And I sat next to one of their dental representatives on the flight, and I grilled him for the entire flight. And by the time I got to the event, I had a joke about the Cavitron 3000. If I told you the joke right now, you'd be like, that's not a good joke. Exactly. But if you were a dentist and I busted out a Cavitron 3000, which is one of the pieces of equipment they use, like you would lose it. And so it's a balance of both. You see the human in every audience and say, there's a universal experience we're all having with fear and hope and sadness and challenge. And then you customize it, which is such a way to honor an audience. And so you customize it with particular jokes, particular ideas, particular hopes that are unique to them. And that to me is what creates magic in a speech.
Yeah, I love that. And it's not so much customizing where you pretend to be an expert in their field, right?
Ooh.
It's just being an expert on humans and then interjecting some things that apply to their field.
Oh, if you do it the wrong way, if I try to speak technically to a group of hedge fund managers, they know immediately this guy doesn't manage portfolios. Yeah. Like, so you're never, I always say you're empathizing with them. You're not mimicking them. You don't mimic an audience because that's not authentic. They want you to be, they hired you to be Jon Acuff, or they hired you to be Liz Bohannon. You be that, but then you also dip into their world and go, here's how the thing I do applies to what you do.
Yeah, that's fun. Hey, one other thing that you've talked about after speaking on the Summit stage is just realizing how many CEOs or organizational leaders are listening to the Summit, which has actually resulted in you doing lots of talks, right?
Oh, it's unbelievable. The first time it turned into 20 other speaking engagements, which is unheard of. I told you right before we got on, I've got 8 events this October, and I've got 8 events this month, and that's a byproduct of that. And so for me, I shared that from stage in part because I didn't know, and I've been around GLN and GLS for a long time. I didn't know the breadth of it. And so I shared that because when you sit in the room, you can tell, wow, there's a lot of people here. But when you're watching at a site and there's 10 people and you go, are there a lot of other me's doing this? And I want to say there are a lot of other me's, because not only is there that moment, it's shown the rest of the year globally. Like the G, I sometimes joke, this is just a little joke I like, that like if you say international in your church title, it means you're a small church. Like often when you go, it's an international church and they have flags everywhere and you go, how many people go there? They go, about 40. I'm like, oh, okay, international. The G in global is genuine. It's a genuine global movement. So the rest of the year, what's going to happen to me or any other speaker is I'm going to get feedback from somebody who goes 6 months after it, aired in Chicago. Hey, I'm in Nigeria, and this was really encouraging. We just watched, 20 of us just watched this. So for me, that was mind blowing too. Of like the G is genuine. It is global. and you feel that as a speaker. And I wanted to share that experience with the audience so that they know we're in this together. There is a global movement.
Yeah. So one other comment real quick, Jon, on your speaking. So you are one of the best speakers in the world. And you and I were talking, I want to say back in January, February. I just remember it was freezing outside. We were downtown Chicago eating at a pizza place, froze on my way there, walking.
Yeah, it was so cold.
I think I even bought a beanie on the way out just to try to cover up and not be so cold walking back to the car. But as we were talking, you were on deck to speak at the summit the following August. I was going to have opportunity to speak. I've spoken for 40 some years as a pastor. So every weekend I'm preaching, teaching to thousands of people. And yet, as you were preparing to talk, you were telling me about your coach. And you'd actually recruited a coach to help you be better as a speaker. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, if Jon thinks he needs a coach to be better to speak at the summit, I'm in real trouble and I need help. And so I asked you if you'd help me. But talk about that a little bit, because we probably at some point think, I'm good enough. This is good enough. And yet you weren't satisfied with that. You wanted to be better.
Yeah, I think the thing that I tell people sometimes is adulthood is holding two opposite things in your hands at the same time often. Like one would be, I see leaders do this all the time. Great leaders, in my opinion, accept uncertainty. They realize I don't control the weather. I don't control tariffs. I don't control who moves to our city and ends up being the best employee. They accept uncertainty and they also increase certainty. They work really hard to have systems. They work really hard to be deliberate. So they do both opposite things. And so for me, whether you're trying to be a leader, whether you're a writer, whether you're a speaker, you can be content and hungry at the same time. I feel very fortunate and blessed that I've built the career I've built, and I have the craft I have, and I've honed it to the place I've honed it. And I love that I get to be on a stage like GLS, but I'm also hungry. I want to get better. And I think when I look at real leaders that have the kind of impact that I want to have, they never stop. Meaning, it's not that they're driven and they don't enjoy it. And you've bumped into leaders like that where you're like, oh, they're so obsessed with the next level, they can't enjoy the current level. What I mean is that they have a level of excellence and they go, okay, how could I make it better? And what could I do better? And the reason I hired the coach was one of my team members traveled with me to an event in Orlando. I spoke to a software company and I got a standing ovation. Standing ovation, the event went great. And about an hour later at the airport, he said, hey, I got some feedback on that talk about some things you can do better. And I thought, oh, this is an invitation to leadership, meaning I could easily ego-wise go, I'm not taking any feedback. I just got a standing ovation. They loved it. But instead I said, well, what do you have to say? And the things he had to say were correct. And so for GLS, I knew 6 months before, I want to have a coach who's telling me that's too much content. You're really excited about this story. It's too long. Or, hey, that joke is funny to you. It's not funny to everybody else. Or, hey, here's how to think about it. And then if you start to look at great leaders, great performers, high achievers, they're never self-made and they're never trying to do it all on their own. They always have wise people around them. And so I'm trying to do, the older I get, the more I try to do that. And again, my ego would say the opposite of you've arrived, you already know everything, don't listen to anybody. But man, when I see leaders that have that attitude, they're a couple steps away from doom. And so I'm trying to surround myself with people who tell me the truth.
Is any of that driven by lack of self-confidence, or do you get nervous before you go on the stage, or are you pretty confident when you go out that you know it's going to be a good talk?
The hard part about GLS this year was I was the last speaker. So it felt like, and I came for the whole event. So it felt like a 2-day Christmas Eve. I wanted to go. I was ready. I was excited. So that part was hard. I would say more what I'm learning from self-confidence is, I'll turn 50 this year. And one of the things I'm thinking about a lot is how do I like myself? That's a curious idea to me is, how do I like myself? And my wife recently convicted me on this. We have this community I teach online. We have a goal community and I do twice a month coach calls with them, meaning it's on Zoom. There's 100 people. They're asking me questions and the questions, they're so authentic and I really get to speak into their lives. And Jenny, my wife, overheard me do an hour of this. And she said, when you're on that hour, you're so encouraging, you're so uplifting. But then when you sit down to write, you're writing to yourself and you beat yourself up a lot. She said, I wonder if you could talk to those people the same way you talk. I wonder if you could talk to yourself the same way you talk to those people. And that was really convicting because she was right. When I talk to me, I'm going, you better get it together. If this doesn't work, it's going to all fall apart. Like you're one step away from this kind of collapsing. Like you've got to really get your life together. And then to somebody else who is in a similar position, I'm going, I think you need to give yourself some credit. I think you've done a hard thing. I think you've got like an amazing road ahead of you. Like I had a woman the other day, one of the questions, she was a really successful business leader. She developed brain cancer. And her big fear at the time was, I'm going to be a burden to my brother and sister. And so I said to her, I think you need to go ask them if you're a burden because I know the answer. And I think you need to know the answer. And they're going to be saddened you carried that thought for 6 months, that broken soundtrack, and they have the sutures for the wound you have. You don't have the sutures for that wound. They have that. And I was so generous and it was genuine. And then I switched to me and I'm like, you better get it together. So I would say not lack of self-confidence, but one of my goals in 50 is to learn how to like myself. And man, I'm getting that question from younger generations. I had an 18-year-old the other day say, Mr. Jon, you tell me to be kind to myself in what you write, but these other influencers tell me to yell at myself and beat myself up and tough love and all this. What's the difference? And boy, I was able to speak into that. And so I think so many leaders are afraid they'll lose their edge if they stop beating themselves up. And I think you actually become a better leader when you stop doing that. And so that's the thing I'm exploring right now is like, how do I learn to like myself and what will that do to my leadership?
And how are you coming with that? Are you liking yourself more? Are you?
I would say I'm early phase on that. I mean, the first thing was just realizing like, oh wow, it's right. I do beat myself up. Like part of what happened, David, a few years ago, probably not a few years. It's funny. Like 15, 17 years ago, I had an ad agency that failed that I started. And the soundtrack I took from that, and I use the phrase soundtrack is just a repetitive thought. The soundtrack I learned was I can function in a crisis. I had to save the day. I had to like really work hard. And the agency still went out of business, but I was able to pay back the bills. Like I can function in a crisis. But then over time, that turned into I function best in a crisis. And over time, it turned into I need a crisis to function. And we've all worked with leaders who are great at putting out fires, but when there's not a fire, they then start a fire. Okay. And so my wife said to me, I got a big book deal. And she said, I'm worried about this. And I said, why? And she said, well, you're a jerk for the 2 years when you sell a book, and you're a jerk for the 2 years when you write a book. And I would rather be married to a happy plumber than a miserable writer. And what she was saying was that for me to perform at the level I was performing at, I had to stir up chaos and anger and fear and all these negative fuels to get it done. So my hypothesis is, yes, fear, anger, stress, whatever, as a leader will get you to a certain spot, but it's not a sustainable fuel. And just like when a rocket leaves the atmosphere, it needs a really crazy intense fuel to leave the atmosphere, but then they drop it because it's not a manageable fuel. It can't be manipulated and take you where you need to go. And so I think part of my leadership journey is going, oh wow, I've used negativity and it's accomplished some things. I would never tell leaders otherwise, but it's not sustainable long term. What does kindness look like? And the problem, David, if you speak unkindly to yourself, you eventually speak unkindly to everyone else. Like I invented this new idea called the heart overflows. It's just an original concept I came up with. It's certainly not been in the Bible for thousands of years. Exactly. How you talk to yourself internally is how you talk externally. So when a leader gets fired for an abusive power issue, I know how they've been talking for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And what I've discovered is by the time a leader's outer game blows up, the inner game has been abusive for a lot longer. Mm-hmm. And so that idea is curious to me, and we'll see if maybe someday that's another idea I get to share at GLS, but that I'm in the early stages of that, and I'm really curious about it.
Hey everybody, it's Eric, content producer for the Global Leadership Podcast. Ever hear the expression, that person has the memory of an elephant? It's not very common these days, Because with all of our screens and distractions, studies show that 70% of new information we take in is forgotten within 24 hours. No wonder leaders have a hard time keeping their audiences engaged. You can grab attention, but getting people to retain your message, that's the real challenge. And that's where PulseSpark excels. PulseSpark is a full-service agency specializing in events, activations, and campaigns. They use cognitive science to help messages connect on the subconscious level to build lasting memories. PulseSpark was the official creative partner of the 2025 Global Leadership Summit, helping create the full experience, from the artistic opening moment to the compelling story videos, delivering an unforgettable event. Are you ready to create some jumbo-sized memories? Visit pulsespark.com to learn more. That's pulsespark.com, creating experiences that make brands easy to love and hard to forget. Now let's get back to today's episode.
So twice now you've mentioned Jenny and her speaking into your life. And so how important has she been in shaping you? And do you always appreciate her speaking in, or are there times you go, yeah, thanks, but no, thank you?
Yeah, I mean, instrumental, like in every possible way. No, the reality is, I always say one of my goals in marriage is to shorten the distance between the time when she tells me something and I believe it's true. And when we first got married, I would be a huge liar if I was on this podcast and I was all like, no. And she gave me hard feedback. I just said, thank you for loving me that way. What a Proverbs 31 woman. You must stand at the gate. Like, no, that wasn't my attitude. My attitude was grumpy and sullen. And I was a 25-year-old little punk that would be like, oh, what does she know what she's talking about? And now when she gives me feedback, like she reads all my books. And there was one she read 20 chapters of, and she only liked 3. And when she said that, I argued with her. And then I went to my office and I had about a grumpy hour where I was like, I'm a New York Times bestseller. What does she know what she's talking? Like I did that thing. But then I quickly realized, like, no, she's for me. She's not, this is my fear speaking up. So how do I receive this? She wants the best for me. Like, so I reminded myself of the truth. And then I was able to go, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. This part was boring, but when she gives me that feedback in that particular moment, my fear goes, you're all out of words. You have no more words. Like any pastor who's gotten feedback on, I don't think that story makes sense. The fear is, well, I'm out of stories. I have no more stories. This is the only story I had and Sunday's coming. And then you overreact. And so I would say in 25 years of marriage, I've definitely learned to receive that and to recognize the heart behind it, which is, I'm your biggest fan. I want this to be the best. Like, how can we make it the best?
And do you find you react that way to anybody that's speaking in to your life or what you're doing? Or do you have filters as to who you listen to and who you don't?
Yeah, well, I mean, I tell young people, because I've got a real heart for especially young men in their 20s. I always say, like, never take career advice from someone who hates their job. Like, that's not a person you should take career advice from. Like, don't let a grumpy 48-year-old speak into your life, because they're gonna give you some terrible advice because they're very unhappy. Don't let them share their unhappiness with you. So no, I have probably at any given moment 5 to 10 people that I'm saying, okay, here's this idea I'm working on, and I'm really leaning into community. I recently stopped. I used to do a CrossFit type workout in my garage, and I did it alone for 2 years. And a neighbor invited me to this boot camp style one called F3 that I've been going to, and it's 20 other guys at 5:30 in the morning in a dark parking lot, and I'm loving the community of that. And so no, I really put a priority on having people that can, share ideas but again, like, it's not a million people, and it's people I trust and it's people I look up to, like. And, I consider people that are ahead of me to be time machines. They've been to the future I'm trying to get to. And if I'll ask them questions, they'll tell me. So I asked you at that cold dinner. We weren't outside. It was just, we knew we had to go back outside. Yeah. I asked you, I'm a year and a half into empty nest. I've got 2 kids. One's about to be 20, one's 22. And parenting adult children feels harder than I thought it would be. And you said very astutely, well, Jon, when you've got an 8th grader and they get cut from the volleyball team, that's sad. When you have a 28-year-old and they get divorced, that's tragic. So it's harder in some regards because the stakes are higher and you have less control. So that was me saying to you, hey, I thought I was kind of done with parenting at 18. Like, hey, there you go. Like, I thought it would be like easier than when they were 3. And I said, it's not right now, David, person who's ahead of me. What would you speak into that? And then you shared that and I received that. And then because of my job, I get to share that with a lot of people. And so I feel very fortunate to have wise people that I get to interact with.
And somebody that doesn't have that, what are they missing out on? If you didn't have people speaking into your life, how would you be different?
Oh man. Well, I think you make way more mistakes way more often. I mean, sometimes it's having somebody go, the bridge is out. I've gone down that path. I'm just here to tell you the bridge is out. Like I had a post go viral on Instagram and it doesn't happen often, but it went viral. 10,000 people shared it. And usually like it'll be 50 people. And it was a video of me at my daughter's college campus and it was to young men. And I said, parents, send this to your young men. And I said, ask her out. Like you might get told no, that's okay. Ask the other person out. Like you're missing, if you're at a college campus, you're missing your greatest chance to connect with a young woman and you're going to graduate and go work in an office that has three women. And they're all your mom's age and you're not going to want to go out with them. So, and I said that because I was a senior before I met Jenny and thank goodness I did. But I keep seeing young men who are afraid to ask people out and they're not doing it and they're not dating in high school and they're not dating in college. And nobody's telling them that. They're telling them, oh, it's later. And so I want to be the opposite of that. And so if you don't have people, and I'll be one of them online for you, certainly. But if you don't have people in your circle saying, hey, I see this in you, let's just take that. Pure self-awareness, 100% self-awareness is impossible. You are not designed that way. You are not designed to 100% perfectly see what you're capable of, what your weaknesses are, what your opportunities are. So I think you just miss so many chances to plug into your full potential, to use talents you didn't know you have, to have connections. And the last thing I'd say is it fast forwards your progress. Like you at GLS and GLN know so much of it's relational. You guys do an amazing job of when you speak, you're now a faculty and it's you're an alumni. And Todd Henry, you weren't speaking this year, but we want you there in Chicago because we think you might need to know James Hewitt. And maybe not, but let's see. Like maybe the two of you can create a third thing. That's like, a shorthand for that is friends hire friends. Friends hire friends. And I tell young people all the time, your relationship will get you the first gig, your skills will get you the second. You can't show up and be terrible. You got to be good. But man, you get to skip a lot of lines where somebody goes, oh, yeah, I know him. Oh, yeah, they're great. Like Juliet Funt, she's amazing. Like I know her. Like she should do this. Like you miss out on so many opportunities if you're isolated and don't connect with people.
Because pretty much that's to some degree how life happens. It's because 100%. Yeah, exactly.
100%. Yeah, because I mean, think about like this is kind of inside baseball. You guys said to me, hey, we would love Walker Hayes to be at GLS. You live in Nashville. Do you know anybody? Do you know Walker Hayes? Do you know anybody that does? I didn't know him. But I knew somebody who knew him, who had written with him. So I texted that person and said, hey, there's this event. It's massive. I said, I'll put my name on this thing. It's not like some weird event at the Ramada with 40 people. Like, this is GLS. And then he got Walker Hayes' manager to connect with you guys. And then I got to dance with Walker Hayes at GLS, who had a blast. But that wouldn't have been on his radar unless we relationally put that together. So yeah, I just think that's so fun when that happens. And it's with people you enjoy. Like I enjoyed every step of that. Like, cause Walker got blessed, you got blessed, I got blessed. Like every part of it was fun.
Yeah. Real fun. Adding to that story, we happened to be, Ruth, my wife and I were vacationing in Ocean City, New Jersey. He was going to be performing in Atlantic City, New Jersey, 30 minutes away. So we go to his concert, able to connect. Very cool to watch him do his thing in in a casino setting and sing
Very
his songs,
different,
but also share his faith about Jesus. And so just real fun to watch all that play out. So
very full circle, the best.
Exactly. So how does that relate to your new book? It's called Procrastination Proof, Never Get Stuck Again. And I think the main idea of the book is really about giving yourself permission to live the life that you want. I think that's the phrase that I've kind of picked up. And so talk more about that. What does that look like? And what holds people back from giving themselves permission to move forward?
Yeah, so I've been doing this kind of goal mindset kind of work for the last 15 years or so. And there's really three big obstacles people run into, in my opinion: perfectionism, procrastination, and overthinking. So I wrote a book about perfectionism called Finish, like give yourself the gift of done. I wrote a book about overthinking called Soundtracks. And so it was time to kind of face that last dragon of procrastination, of why do we, knowing we want to do the thing, why do we hold back? I mean, we did a study where we asked 3,000 people if they feel like they're living up to their full potential, and 96% of them said no. And so I know most people feel like, oh, I'm capable of something more, and procrastination gets in the way of that. And so there's a number of reasons people procrastinate. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's they don't even know the thing's a possible path. Like I live in Nashville, and there's so many people you meet here that'll say, I grew up in Wichita and I didn't even know you could be a full-time songwriter. They didn't know. It was just, they were procrastinating because they didn't even have the knowledge that there was a thing that existed. And so that's what the book's about, is how do we ultimately give ourselves permission? What does it look like for us to say, okay, I have permission to pursue this? And then as a leader, what are the permissions your team needs? The 4 permissions I talk about in the book are the permission to dream, permission to plan, permission to do, and permission to review. And it creates this really simple loop of like, okay, do you need to dream more? And it's fun. As I've talked about this with teams, they get it immediately. I spoke to a leadership team the other day, and I said, here's where dreamers get stuck, perfectionists, procrastinators. Like I shared what I shared at GLS, and I asked an executive after, I was like, did that make sense? And she said, I wrote down people's names next to each one of those because we're dealing with that right now. Or I talked to a big church recently, and I know they have 85% dreamers on staff and only about 5% doers. So most artistic thing you've ever experienced, but you go like, I think we may have lost 80 grand on VBS. Has anybody checked that? Like we had 4 kids come. We should just give those kids' parents 20 grand each to bring their kid to church, save the time on VBS. And so wow, we need some people that are good at review, or we need some good people that are good at planners. And so I love to take what feels fuzzy, like overthinking feels fuzzy, and say, here's soundtracks. Or procrastination feels murky and like, what do we even do with it? And go, no. There's just 4 permissions: dream, plan, do, review. And you'll know which one you need. Here's how you can tell which one you need. And here's how to actually do it. And you'll never procrastinate again because you've just got these 4 steps, and it's really, really simple. And it becomes this success loop. So that's what the book's about. And I write books that people can raise their hand for. So if you're ever going to write a book, a nonfiction book like one of these, I always think about a question that people admit they have. So if you write a book purely about fear, people have a hard time admitting that. If you go like, it's a book about people who have rage, like very few people are like, I got that. Oh, rage. But if you say like, finish, is it ever hard for you to finish the things you start? Who says no to that? Who goes, no, I finished everything. What are you talking about? Or, hey, I wrote a book about overthinking. Do you ever overthink? Nobody goes, no, I think the exact right amount of thoughts. It's weird to even mention that. I'm not like, or, hey, it's a book about procrastination. Do you ever procrastinate the things you really want to do and sometimes maybe even hide from them? And nobody goes, no, I've always done everything I wanted. I've chased every dream I've ever had. Like this year turned out exactly the way I hoped it would. I write books that a lot of people can raise their hand to, and then they can share with other people. That's the joke I sometimes do is like, no husband wants to read a book about rage given to him by his wife. If you come home and go, the pastor at church did a sermon on uncontrolled anger, and here's a book, I'm going to slide it on your nightstand. Like, let me know how that goes. So they're books that people want to read, and then they want to share because they're super accessible and they deal with a real issue and a real fun solution.
So if people are interested in this book, it's not out till April, but one of the fun things you did with us at the GLN is you made, was it the first 8 chapters available?
Yeah, first 8 chapters.
People?
Yeah. So if you go to
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to jonacuff.com/GLS, so JONACUFF.com/GLS, you can read the first 8 chapters. And yeah, it's not, I'm dying for it to get out, but like, how these things go, like you turn it in and then you kind of wait. Talk about like, do you ever get, like Christmas Eve to get up on stage? Like, it feels like I got a while until this one comes out, but I'm sharing the ideas. I'm already talking to so many companies again because of GLS. So yeah, it's fun to see the response already.
So where do you go in the book, Jon? I think there's a Peyton Manning commercial I've seen a couple of times during football games now where he's this motivational speaker and he's telling everybody, you can do whatever you want to do and get out there and do it. And this real skinny, unathletic looking guy stands up and says, I want to be an NFL quarterback. And Peyton's kind of like, you can dream, you can do that. So as you're talking about these permissions to dream and do and so forth, do you address in the book maybe the dream is the wrong dream? Or what do you say to people if they're kind of going down a direction it's not ever going to happen?
Well, I mean, so from a practical standpoint, dreaming runs on optimism, planning runs on realism. So that's where people get stuck sometimes. They have an amazing, like, I'm going to do this crazy thing, and it's a dream. But then when you get to planning, there needs to be some realism involved. And I'm not a motivational speaker that would say, like, I wasn't going to be in the NBA, David. Like, there's no amount of push-ups. There's no amount of believing in myself. I looked it up. In the history of the NBA, there's been 5 players my height or shorter, and they all had nicknames like Muggsy and Spud. So let's be like, does that mean I couldn't be in a rec league that I love and feel the thrill of competition? Like, no, of course not. So I always say, like, I believe you can be the best version of you. Let's figure out what that looks like, because I think there is that lie of like, you can be anything. And I actually do address it in the book, especially around parents. What I say to the parents in the book is one of the cruelest things you can do to your kids is tell them they can be remarkable without telling them the price. It's such cruelty. Meaning, if my daughter says, Dad, I want to be a National Merit Scholar, and I go, you could do that, and I don't tell her what that costs, I'm being cruel. Because when she bumps into it eventually, the reality of it, and she fails because she wasn't prepared, 2 things will happen. She'll be disappointed in herself. She'll feel like, I'm a failure. I was told this was easy and I failed, so I must be a failure. Or she'll get entitled and go, how dare the world not just give me this thing I want? So there is that tension, and you definitely see that in parenting. So if you have a son that says, I want to play football in high school, I want to be the starting running back, that's amazing. I'm here for that. So here's what that costs. So we're going to get a trainer. We're going to hire a coach for the morning. We're going to get you a nutritionist. I talked to somebody, it's so funny you bring this up. I talked to somebody Thursday and they said, oh yeah, my nephew went to Harvard. And I was like, that's amazing. He said, yeah, in 8th grade, he realized there was an obscure path with a sport to Harvard that would be the only path he could take. So he got a trainer, he got a nutritionist, they picked the right sport, he became really good at that sport, and then he got a full ride to Harvard, and he's loving Harvard. But imagine if in 8th grade they just said to that kid, oh, you want to go to Harvard? Just believe in yourself. And then he doesn't do any of that stuff. And we were at GLS, we were there. I mean, we got to see Nick Saban say this exact point. He brings the kids in. 19-year-old football player, 18-year-old football player. He asks them 2 questions. What's your goal? And do you know what it costs? What's your goal? Oh, you want to be in the NFL? Do you know what it costs? Because I know what it costs. Here's what it costs. And then third is, are you willing to do it? And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. So if somebody said to me, I want to do this, I'd go, okay, well, let's figure out the cost. And then let's figure out if you're willing to do it. It's not most things aren't impossible. And most of the time, I very rarely meet somebody who's that far off from what they're capable of, meaning we always use the example of like, but what if I wanted to be in the NFL, or what if I wanted to play in the NBA? I've helped more than 1 million people with goals. I've still never had the 5'2" guy come to me and go, Jon, I want to play for the Celtics. Like, we use that as an exaggerated example, but I just don't ever bump into it. I much more, or I want to be the next Elon Musk and I'm currently unemployed. And I go, oh, there's a bit like, I don't know if you're going to be maybe the world's first trillionaire, but we're going to try. People dream much more reasonably than that, I feel like.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. And I will say you're already making me feel a little bit convicted here from the standpoint of saying to your kids or others, Man, yeah, you can do that, but not following up with the price. So that's huge to.
Well, and not too much for the price. So the last caveat to that, I'd say, David, is you don't tell them the whole price at first because that's discouraging. So if your 8-year-old wants to play football, you don't go, well, let's talk about the NIL deals. Let's talk about creatine. That's discouraging. No, you say, okay, buddy, let's get you in a flag football tournament and let's see what that looks like. And let's walk you down that. Like, let's figure that out together, step by step. And so that, to me, that's where a good coach comes in hand, a good parent, a good mentor. Like, they share. And I'll tell you where my entitlement was. I'll never forget this. Greg McEwen, who wrote the book Essentialism. Brilliant book, awesome guy. We've become friends. He was on Tim Ferriss's podcast. Tim Ferriss has a massive podcast, one of the biggest in the world. And I saw he was on that, and I texted him, was like, oh, I'd love to be on that podcast. And I was in my own sense of entitlement, hoping he'd be like, sure, I'll connect you with Tim today. You could be on tomorrow. And instead he said, great. Do you want to know how I did it? Do you want to know the process? And of course there was a process. It wasn't a button. It was, he probably spent 6 months nurturing that relationship and being deliberate and I had to go, oh, I just tried to get something without knowing the price. And he very kindly said, yeah, no problem. Here's the price. So if somebody says to me, hey, I saw you at GLS, I want to do that. Like, I don't go, well, let me get David's number. Like, let's figure that out. I'd say, well, when I started, I spoke for free a lot. Like, I used to speak at a rehab center because nobody else was competing for that. And if you want to encourage people, man, 12 dudes that are at a rehab center and they've blown up their life, like, go encourage them. Write a half-hour speech for them. Like, speak at an old age home. Like, I have friends that spoke at senior living facilities. Go encourage 20 seniors. Like, I wish it was dream to GLS, but man, I mean, if you can find a faster path in 12 years, then let me know. But like, this was my path and it doesn't feel like failure. By the time I got there, I was ready, and boy, it was fun. It's kind of like they say, like people say, you could probably run a marathon tomorrow. You just wouldn't enjoy it. Like, the training is why you enjoy it. Like, you could probably you could probably win a lottery and go speak at GLS tomorrow, but like, you wouldn't enjoy it and the crowd would enjoy it. And
exactly.
So I think about that all the time.
And for us as leaders to hear people's dreams and actually do them the favor of helping them figure out the process. Because really what you're saying is, I want to join in that dream with you by helping you figure out the process, and I'll walk it with you, but I'll help you in the process. I think that's cool. Yeah. And you get to walk them through and say, the reason I'm helping you is I do believe in you. The reason I'm helping you is because I do see something in you, and I might even see more than you think. And here's the process, and here's the plan. That I've had a lot of leaders that were there was a guy named Joel Thomas. I remember my blog took off. He was at North Point, and he was talking to me about coming to speak at their single adults weekend. And I was like, I can do the whole thing. I'll be your main speaker. And he was like, whoa, hey, I love your enthusiasm. We're going to give you a breakout. There's another guy named Brennan Manning. He's going to do the whole weekend because he's done this for 60 years. And Ragamuffin Gospel is a lot of content to pull from. And maybe someday you'll do this. But for right now, I would love you to do a breakout. And there was a part of me initially was like, nah, I can do the whole thing. I've been thinking about these ideas for an hour. And he loved me enough as a leader to go, hey, I'm going to put you in the best spot. And as you continue to be faithful to that spot, someday maybe you do a whole weekend, or someday you maybe do GLS, but it's not today. And if I gave it to you too fast, it would discourage you and you would maybe quit the whole thing. Yeah. Hey, Jon, it's always fun talking with you. Love the way your mind thinks and the way you're pouring into other people. So thank you for using your gifts, your abilities to shape leaders and all of us. And so appreciate that very much. If people want to connect with you or even get those free 8 chapters again, how do they get a hold of you?
So jonacuff.com/GLS is the free chapters. And then I send out a newsletter every other week. If you go to jonacuff.com/newsletter, you can get that there. And then I'm Jon Acuff on Instagram and most social media. And then I've got a podcast called All It Takes Is a Goal, where I've interviewed a lot of GLS faculty. It's been, cool. I've had Craig on there. That was a really fun episode, hearing about how he does his goals. Because if you meet Craig for 30 seconds, you get that guy has goals. Like, he's not casually doing things. He's a goal guy. And so, it's called All It Takes Is a Goal. That's my podcast.
Very cool. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jon.
Okay, I told you that was going to be good. Jon Acuff always brings that perfect mix of humor and truth, doesn't he? I personally resonated with his wisdom about not only setting the goal, but recognizing what it will take to get there. I easily fall into the dreamer category and can come up with 1,000 new ideas in an afternoon, especially in a conversation with another dreamer. You dreamers know who you are. But to be reminded about what it takes to get from point A to point B is important work. So whatever you took away from today's conversation, let's remember this. Getting started doesn't require the perfect plan. It just requires the first step. You don't need all the answers. You just need momentum. So let me challenge you right now, before you move on with your day. What's one thing that you've been putting off that you could take one small step toward? Maybe it's sending an email or making that call or revisiting that goal you've been avoiding. You know the goal. Just one step. As David and Jon reminded us, when you move forward, even imperfectly, you create momentum, and momentum changes everything. At the Global Leadership Network, that's what we're all about, helping you identify those moments where you can grow, stretch, and take bold steps toward your God-given potential. So wherever you lead, whether it's at a church, office, home, start today. Take that next step. And if this episode encouraged you, would you do us a quick favor? Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps more people discover this content. And remember, everyone has influence, so lead right where you are.